Namaste and greetings to all of you. I feel privileged, delighted, and humbled to be here amidst a galaxy of educators, leaders, and visionaries. Personally, and as an institutional belief, we are shy of gatherings, particularly shy of awards and rewards. However, this being an opportunity to share some of our perceptions, experiences, and ideas, I'm here. Thank you, Prem and the Cfore team, Mr. Brahmam and the Brainfeed team for giving this opportunity to be here. What I'm going to share with you today is not anything new, anything sophisticated, anything complex. You don't need to take down notes because these are things that you have practiced, you have believed also. I'm a teacher from the Valley School in Bangalore. And the Valley School and the other 5 schools, Krishnamurti schools in India, are aligned and rooted in the teachings of J. Krishnamurti and the profound vision and teachings he had about life. So whatever I reflect, I share today, will be rooted to that. Now, the intent of our schools is not merely to help children achieve a certain career or become socially successful, not merely for that, but to see if these are places that can nurture children in flowering in goodness and acquire the capacity to meet the world intelligently and with sensitivity. That's why this topic on sensitivity. Regarding pedagogy, techniques, methods, and so on, all of us are well versed with it. And we have a great command over this, what with rapid increases in technology. But one is apprehensive that with all these, if we are forgetting some fundamentals, and what could these be fundamentals? So my sharing for the next whatever time is sharing of those which all of you know, all of you treasure, all of you consider important. So consider this as a reminder, a reassurance, rather than telling you anything that you don't know. I would submit that again humbly. I understand the eagerness with which we are all planning future-ready schools. Absolutely, it sounds exciting, it sounds interesting. However, I don't think any of us have any clue as to what the future is going to be. So if I may say so, it is more appropriate to call it a readiness for the present day. So we can rephrase it as present day school, if that's all right. In order to look at the present day with an intent not to address symptoms or provide solutions, it may be more appropriate to pause and reflect what could be the cause for the present day. And when we look at the cause, maybe some things will reveal as absolute facts and we can pay attention to it. Not that you don't, but somehow they get into the back burner because of other priorities. So let me try and see if I can price open some of these basic human traits, the fundamentals. Let's start with a question of what is the situation today? What are the challenges that all of us face, particularly the youth and the children? I would like to look at these as 4 important aspects. I'm sure there are more. The first one is climate change and its grave consequences. Somehow the human mind is so resilient that anything that is so disturbing, anything that is so devastating, we seem to look at it as a piece of information or sensation alone. So, be it the floods in Gurugram or the devastation in the mountains, we read it with concern only for a short while. It doesn't seem to strike us something that is very close to us, unless it happens in our backyard. Is it possible to look at these things as something that is affecting the humankind and not just somebody far away? The world that we live in, the conflicted landscape, where there is increasing division amongst human beings, polarization at the religious level, political level, social level, and the kind of bounty of fake news and echo chambers where we only like to hear what we like to hear. We hear only what we like to hear. This is the reality of today's world. And it's not just you and me who can meet this with a certain amount of maturity, but those tender minds who get carried away. Is it not important to recognize the kind of impact it has on children? The social pressures is something that is not anything new to you. The rapid increase in technology, which brings with it its own powers, but also a lot of concerns. That leading to the highly competitive job market, heightened value of success, heavy competition, and the heightened worries of failure. Not that it wasn't there in the humankind, but it seems to have got much more exaggerated. Again, something that all of us are familiar with. This is not philosophical, it is real. When we talk about a certain meaninglessness in life, that may be more appropriate a word for adults, but even for children and for youth, all these are things that are rampant. The feeling of loneliness in spite of having networks and friends and so on, you as teachers and parents would have certainly recognized the feeling of boredom in spite of a lot of entertainment that is prevalent. The deep urge for power at a very early age, the image, the identity crisis. I'm sure you're dealing with all these. Now, when we compile all these, is it not important for us also to understand what could be the primary cause for these things? And is there anything that we can do about the cause, apart from addressing the symptoms? Symptoms are managed very easily. We have counselors, we have advisors, we have lots of other things to manage the symptoms. But is it possible to go to the root? Again, if you look at the causes, would it be all right to say that one of the primary causes is the deterioration of the human mind? The way we look at things, the way we relate to people, the way we relate to nature, and therefore look at this sensitivity as something that is waning, not just in children, in the adults primarily, and therefore in the children. Sorry, I don't mean to sound morbid or accusative, but pricing it as a fact. Therefore, can we look at some things as to what could be important? What does it mean to be human? Not in the romantic side of the word, but biologically, actually. And what is it that we hold dear in our hearts? And what should education do? What should education attempt to address this root cause? So to start with, let's look at what does it mean to be human. So there is the biological part. I happen to teach biology and computer science, so biology is close to my heart. Forgive me, it sounds too biased. The second question can be, what is it that we hold dear? And ultimately, we can look at what could education attempt. Now, if you look at what it means to be human, again, I think I'm carrying coal to Newcastle. All of you know that the human beings are differentiated by a very complex brain. Biologically, we are highly evolved. Some things make us distinctly human. But it's also important to look at something else. First, the biologically unique qualities in us. We have opposable thumbs, we are bipedalistic in nature, we have a complex brain, highly developed brain. We are blessed with the capacity to think, and there is memory, there is intelligence, and all kinds of things that are considered to be unique. But is it also worthwhile looking at some of the things that are common between the human species and the other primates and mammals. Because there seems to be a lot that we learn from them. What I would like to do is to talk about 2 or 3 qualities that seem to overlap between other primates and mammals and human beings, and there is something that we could learn from them. And I would like to classify it into 3 things. One is this beautiful quality of curiosity and play. The second one is this such a valuable trait of being collaborative, learning together and cooperating. And the third one is to be creative and imaginative. Now, all these words have very intellectual meanings and very romantic definitions. But what I am attempting to do is to see if you could relate it to how this has been a common trait between some of the other mammals and us. So let's look at the first one, to be curious. I think all of you would agree that this is a very, very beautiful quality and natural energy of the mind, which is at the heart of learning, which starts very early. You would find a toddler, you would find an infant looking at things with not just curiosity alone, but all the senses converging, taking something, feeling it, smelling it, and using all the senses to converge, which is a quality of attention which nobody demanded. No teacher is there to say, no, pay attention. Now, curiosity is such a stage where a child wants to learn and not told to learn. And gradually, would you agree that that gets eroded because of the systems that we follow, the kind of methods and importance that we give to information? Is this a quality that we should nurture? Or isn't this a quality we should nurture? So I just thought it's interesting to look at the commonality between the other mammals and primates, where curiosity seems to be a way of learning, and closely connected with this is this play. So we are being biologically wired to learn through play is the first submission I would like to make. Now, if you look at the way curiosity operates, this is again a research experiment many of you will be familiar with. It's been done with rats, it's been done with monkeys and so on. Those animals that are deprived of play socially and emotionally, they become socially and emotionally crippled. And when they develop, they overreact with fear and don't explore their environment. With an unfamiliar peer, they freeze in fear and lash out with inappropriate aggression. Just for a moment, put yourself or a human species in that. Does it apply to us also? When we don't have that background of playing naturally and working together, we are all social beings, right? So is this something that education today is depriving children? Is a question one could ask. And this applies to canines. I'm sure many of you are familiar with pets, the way they cultivate that natural element of friendliness vis-a-vis the aggression. Now, when I use the word play, it's not the structured, organized play that is considered as activities with an outcome and so on. One is talking about a natural, self-directed, self-determined activity. I'm sure you would have done it yourself, and you watch children and you derive tremendous joy when you watch children. So we are talking about self-controlled, self-directed, enjoyable, with no definitive purpose. These are not the games and activities and the sophisticated things that the world today boasts of. But these things seem to build an innate quality of spontaneity and freedom. And apart from taking care of the fitness and the physical development and so on, which happens, you don't have to consciously do it through an activity. Are we forgetting this quality of play? There is a scientist by name Peter Gray who has worked extensively on the nature of play, on how it impacts learning. It's a very good read or a very good watch also. So building emotional skills is something that we don't have to do consciously through workshops and through organized classes. It's something that happens. So this is about curiosity and play. Now, the second thing, again, we are biologically meant to be society animals, just like the other primates, right? This is something that comes naturally, not in a cultivated way, but naturally. The feeling of working together, the joy of working together. And this cooperation or working together is not merely to survive, but to thrive, to flourish. And this is again a research finding, some of you may be familiar with, carried out by the Bethel laboratories in Maine, where they constructed a learning pyramid. See, data is not something that we have to gloat over, but just as curiosity, watch. We don't have to say this is the only universal truth, but it's a pointer towards something. So if you look at this, when they looked at the retention rates after getting exposure to some activity or some information or some experience, the average retention rate after 24 hours, this pyramid was constructed. And you could see the impact that each method is having. Lecture, reading, audiovisual, demonstration, discussion group, practice by doing, and teaching. I think you would agree with me that as teachers, we are the most privileged because as we teach, we learn. It's not just a statement which is a lip service, but it is so true. Each time we teach, we internalize and we learn. So these are pointers to say that there is something else that we are missing out. And to accentuate this further, this painting I'm sure fascinates you. This is a 12th century painting by Voltaire, which shows you, it depicts a lecture given by Henry in Germany. And you can see the pupils, quite familiar gestures, some of them sleeping, some of them writing something else, some of them chatting, quite disinterested, aren't they? So, I'm sure we have all come a long way from depending on lectures, but I would still like to pose this, the blackboard method, or now it is replaced by smart boards or the computer even, where we are giving and children learn. We lecture and we assume that it is being assimilated. So I thought this might be a good pointer. Now, looking at how we learn, again, I can't preach to a group of people who are already so familiar with learning, but I feel like expressing this, that while we are all biologically, innately designed to form social bonds, isn't interaction, cooperation the most important thing for children to learn also? And not to put the clock back, if you look at various ancient educational systems, including our own Gurukula systems, they were not taught the 3 R's when they were very young. Instead, they were taught, they were encouraged to take care of themselves, those around them, feel responsible, listen a lot and speak a lot. And maybe at the age of 11 or 12, biologically, Krishnamurti has said, don't teach a child to learn to read and write till the age of 11. Now, it could be something that we can't possibly agree in this practical world, but you can take the essence of what is being said. Do we need to put the cart before the horse? That's the lesson one can take. This is again a scientific thing where a Russian scientist by name Vygotsky finds that zone of proximal development which is unique to children and which flourishes in cooperative learning. Now, if you look at you and me today, I hope it doesn't apply to all of us, but it definitely applied to me when in the earlier years of teaching. When children come and ask, can I work with him or her? Or can we work as a team? The instinct response in me was usually, say, no, you work separately. You have to make sure that you're not copying somebody's work. Is that the only way to do? Is that individualized learning? So that's a question I would like to put. And the third aspect is on this word, much used word called creativity and being imaginative. You know, there are various ways we understand this word. I'm sure each of us will have our own perception. But you could ask a question. Is creativity something that is working towards a goal and in a different way? You do the same thing in a different way. Is that creativity? You draw a tree the way you want, but you draw a tree. Could that be creativity? Now, if you look at some of these ancient tools, which was, of course, they had a purpose, but there was something that was unique about them. There used to be work of art within them. Why? Was there a purpose? Something that was going to be used for practical skills, for hurting, hunting, and so on. Why did it have hurt? So does it need to have a purpose? That's the first question one can ask about creativity. You know, if you look at works of great artists or sculptors and so on, they look at something that is not real. Michelangelo's sculptures or a Ravi Verma's painting will look a little artificial, but we still adore them. We don't say they are not real and therefore they are not practical. So is it possible to look at creativity with just another perspective? Not as an outward act of production, but inward state of mind. A state where you don't say, I'll put 3 points, you put the fourth point wherever you want, but make a square. Yeah? So that need not be creativity. So we create art. That's what I was trying to express through the work of art that we admire. Now, this is again a research finding. Again, we'll give due importance to data, but not get carried away by it. These tests, called the Thorn's tests of creative thinking, was conducted by Professor Hee Kim in Virginia. This is a recent one, where they measured the creativity quotient. The intelligent quotient is something all of us know, emotional quotient and 100 other things. This apparently measured parameters like open-mindedness, originality, fluency, and elaboration as parameters of creative thinking. And the research there proved that there is a great dip in this creativity quotient. And one of the components in creativity is elaboration, not just doing, but expression. How much of this natural, uncultivated expression are we? Uncultivated expression, not the art of speaking or not the art of doing something. I feel terribly nervous to structure something and speak as an individual. But when it is a conversation, when there is an eagerness to say something, then you don't obstruct yourself with, oh, am I saying the right thing and so on. I'm not saying I'm creative, but this is probably a very important thing. So coming to the second aspect of my questions. So what should we hold dear? I'm sure you're going to agree with me when I say these things I pointed out: curiosity, collaborative nature, and creativity, and a few other things, just to mention them briefly. The ability to go through experiences and learn from it, and not just move on. This is a world which says, move on, forget. But to reflect and to become resilient seems so important. Now, independent does not mean that you become separate from the society. No. It is to recognize that each child is unique, to recognize that each child learns at his or her pace, and therefore we can't have one size fitting all. And therefore, it is possible to look at learning as something that is a journey by each child, depending on his pace. Now, is the world going to allow it? No. Is the system going to permit it? May not. But it doesn't mean that we'll have to compromise this at very early ages. It is possible that when you pay attention to the seed and the germination, later on what the tree is going to be is not in your hands. This word sensitivity, which has got so many definitions, can be simply summarized by a personal perception, which is the ability to feel responsible for oneself and those around you. That's it. And a feeling of ourness rather than me, myself. The I, me, myself, which is so strong nowadays, it could possibly be looked at as a major cause of concern, and therefore we can hold it dear. Curiosity is something I have spoken about. And love for learning, which is again something that all of us are very keen to impart, is something we can look at a little more closely. I would like to talk about it a little later. So also about attention and observation. But if you agree that these are things that we can hold dear, then we can go to what can education do? Allow me to produce a quotation by Krishnamurti here. Now, what's the significance of life? What are we living and struggling for? If you are being educated merely to achieve distinction, to get a better job, to be more efficient, to have wider domination over others, then our lives will be shallow and empty. I think it's one, without interpreting, it's for each one of us to look at it and say how true it is for me. We begin the inquiry with each one of us. And when he talks further about education, he's very clear in saying that it does not, as long as education does not cultivate an integrated outlook in life, it has very little significance. Now, this integration is again a very complex word because it is not putting many things together and making a whole. It's probably a belief where we believe that we put fragments together, the sum of the parts will make the total. May not be necessarily so. It could be something deeper. It is the macro that decides the micro and not the other way. I hope it doesn't sound very confusing or vague, but you can inquire and find out for yourself. So, to look at what we can attempt through education, these are some of the parameters I would like to put forth, because these are things that some of us believe in. I'm sure many of you believe and do it also. Freedom to learn without hierarchy and authority. See, authority in the form of functional position, it seems important in a large community, but the psychological authority that I'm older, I'm wiser, I'm more qualified, seems to be not very, very valuable. A human to human connect seems to be more important than a position to connect, even when it comes to children. And the hierarchy that one is talking about is at all levels, not merely in relationships, but also when we look at subjects. Don't we categorize subjects or activities as more important, less important at a very early age? Don't we relegate some things as co-curricular, extracurricular, hobby, and consider something else as important? I mean, are these things that we need to take a second look at? The quality of observation, which is the basis for learning, I would like to talk about a little more in the slides, but I'm sure this is something that all of you have paid attention to. You know, the one of the human instincts, which is fear. There's nobody, no human being who is overcome fear. But to understand the role fear has and see how it inhibits learning is something that we need to carefully look at. Somehow there is this conviction that fear is a motivator. Put the fear in sugar-coated words, it's not fear, it is motivation. I think it is something that we can all take a second look at and see what happens when there is learning without fear. And therefore, if the interest of adults in children is their emotional and mental well-being, fear has no role. Fear can be used at a very, very, very peripheral level, if at all. You know, it's the awkwardness is also in one when you are called better than somebody, or you get the first rank, or you get a better position, and so on, which is again a human trait. You can't wish it away. But to see how it impacts children at a very young age, I know that it's something that is a departure from what is believed in most of the systems. But trust me, if this quality of comparison is not explicitly instilled by the teacher in children, it has a long way. The kind of stability, the kind of ease, the kind of confidence, and the kind of self-worth that flowers in children is something that can be very valuable. So do see if it is something that makes sense to you. Being in nature is something that some of us are blessed with, not merely as a commodity for entertainment or pleasing you or the aesthetic value, but to understand so much. To understand and also care for what is around us, to understand that we are interdependent. This again, sometimes, you know, as children, we were all told about the other side of learning, which is about the inner, is relegated to moral science classes or some other classes where you are taught what to do, what not to do, and the virtues. But to recognize that it can't be done that way, it has to be an integral part of what we do every day. The life in school, the relationships is something that one has to look at. And there are some things that we attempt. I'm sure many of you attempt also. It would be great for a curriculum or a network to be built on. How do we care for the inner? The inner, which is what Krishnamurti referred to as the two horses galloping together. You have on one side methods, skills, techniques, achievements. On the other is the human, the inner richness, the inner beauty, and the inner self. Now, can the two horses gallop together? If one is going to gallop ahead, it can't pull the other. There is something that brings the harmony between them. And what is that something can only be, it can't be prescriptive, definitely by inexperienced people, but one can find out on one's own. So lastly, I would like to talk about what can schools do in the present as a present ready school. And with due respects to the future readiness, I would like to talk about what Krishnaji talked about as a school, a place where the student is basically happy, not bullied, not frightened by the examinations, not compelled to act according to a pattern, a system. It is a place where the art of learning is being taught. The art of learning, how to learn and not what to learn. So I would like to look at 5 pointers here. Can we encourage inquiry and questioning? Can we nurture a love for learning? The art of attention, which I said I would elaborate a little more. Integrating creativity and expression, and lead lives of inner richness and inner beauty. Can these be some of the important, I'm sure there are more, but can these be some of the important pillars that we would like to have our schools? So the inquiry and questioning, see, I'm sure all of us encourage that in very young age without getting irritated, without getting impatient. But when we have to meet deadlines and targets, and as children grow up, due to our own compulsions, we tend to seem to disregard this, and therefore it dies a natural death. However, if these questions are asked, meaningful questions are asked, they don't have to be meted out with an answer immediately. The process of inquiry itself can lead to insights and clarity, right? I mean, if there is a reflection in a child as to why did I get so angry in the basketball court just because somebody else was rude or somebody else used profanity, it could be something that need not be taught or preached as a virtue, but these reflections are very valuable. I know you consider it valuable. The question is, how much time do you give for this? The question is, how much time do you give it at that moment and not in retrospect later on? Then it becomes theory. Then it becomes some kind of hypothetical. See, we talk about the inner freedom, which I don't know if any of us have that, but inquiry can definitely be a pathway towards this is what one feels. Now, this love for learning is, this is a Krishnamurti quote where he talks about learning implies the love for understanding and the love for doing a thing for itself. So let me put it this way. Is it possible to create a love for learning, period? Not the love for learning for a particular thing or a particular, then it becomes something that has got a definite end. But if this quality, this eagerness to learn is instilled or nurtured across whatever we do, maybe it's a very, very valuable attempt that we can make. Observation is usually with, as we understand it, is with an intent of evaluating or assessing. But let's take a look at this flow chart, which could possibly make sense to you. Krishnamurti used to call schools as a place of leisure. Place of leisure. But he did not mean leisure in the sense of these places being places where there is inactivity, lethargy, and indifference. Not that leisure. That's the way we probably understand. He meant leisure as a state of mind which is not preoccupied, which is not anxious, which is working towards a particular goal and then therefore riddled with fear, but a state of being alive to the present. And in case that is there, if that is there, I'm sure we have experienced it. Attention comes and flows in. You don't have to force. It's not concentration. Hey, concentrate on this. Attention is a quality where the senses and particularly governed by the mind are not pulled in different directions. And it can come when there is leisure and there is engagement and then attention happens. And when there is attention, there is observation, which is again not with a particular objective of finding out what should be, what was yesterday, what is tomorrow, but to look at it as it is. And when that observation happens, questioning will automatically arise. And if questioning happens, learning happens, is what one believes. And this learning is actually synonymous with understanding or internalizing, not merely mustering information and reproducing loads of texts and content. Now, if this learning happens, will it not lead to excellence? Now, again, School Rankings, excellence, all these excellence, the way we understand it, is probably at an outward level, which is always in comparison. But is it possible that it is not a result of competition and comparison? It is something that is absolute. It is something that is an inward state of feeling rather than somebody else pitting one against the other. Sorry, and then I think these are, see, some qualities are inevitable. I'm not kind of ridiculing that, but to be completely succumbing to completely succumb to that is what we can look at. So even when you are giving to being very nice to a child or appreciating, always in time in comparison with somebody, then I don't think that is excellent, and that's the belief one has. English is a dicey language. We interpret it in all kinds of vagaries. But we can probably look at excellence in a slightly different way. And last, I already expressed what I felt about creativity as something that is an exclusive quality which has to come in from outside. But this is a question that Krishnamurti asks. One writes a poem or paints. Does that indicate a creative mind? What does creativeness mean? Not the mechanical repetition of the past. So he probably into something as a result. Something very, very important. I would humbly submit that all of us pay adequate attention to this, not in isolation to saying we take care of children, but as a part of our everyday interactions and relationships. The function of education is to help anybody from childhood, not to imitate others, but to be yourself all the time. You know, when we interact with teenagers, you see that for most of them, the tendency to live the life of somebody else seems to be becoming more and more rampant. Do you agree? And we still want every child to be unique, every child to be individual. But whether it is the dress code, whether it is the vocabulary, whether it is the eating habit, or whether it is the taste in music, there seems to be so much of imitation. We don't seem to be doing anything about it. We can't, of course, make children conform and say you should or you should not do it. But to question, do you have to live the life of somebody else, or is there something original? I would like to pose a few questions about conformity. I'll take 5 more minutes. I'm so sorry about this. A few questions on conformity, because these are my perceptions. You know, conformity is following something and we feel it is important. I would like to pose these questions. I don't have the answers, but does it suppress curiosity and individuality? Because we talked about it earlier. Does it encourage superficial compliance? Oh, it does. Do institutional norms hinder deeper learning? Your answers are important to yourself. Areas where we expect conformity, timetables, assessments, classroom behavior, those seem to be more very important functionally. But what does this ensure? Apart from structure and fairness and safety, does it encourage deep sense of responsibility, self-reflection, or we are goats in a herd? And when does conformity become stifling? Just 2 minutes. I'm tempted to share with you a story, because when we talk about this with friends about our priorities and our attempts, the question is, hey, all this is not practical. How can you change the society by doing all this with a small group of children? Possibly. So it's also possible to look at it as different. Krishnamurti talked about the revolution or the change within oneself. He didn't believe in the rebellions and the revolutionary movements outside. He said, if at all somebody can change, it is you. You don't worry about somebody else. And there one is reminded of this Jataka tale of the brave little parrot. I'm sure most of you know. The little parrot which is inside this forest with dense trees. The forest experiences a raging fire one day. All the animals are fleeing and they are looking for their safety. They are going in groups and individuals. This little one is wondering, is there something I can do? And finds a stream and goes and gets a drop of water from the stream nearby and comes and tries to douse the fire repeatedly. And after that is, of course, the Jataka part of it. The Lords in heaven found that this is doing a good deed and therefore there was a heavy downpour and so on. But what I would submit as an essential thing here is to say that I must do what I can. If I believe in something, let me do it. It's possible that somebody near me or my institution or the society may not regard it. It's also possible that I'm able to have that impact on other people. So I would like to end the sharing with you with, again, deep feeling of gratitude to all of you for having listened to me patiently. And I'm sorry I overshot the time. Thank you.